Is there anything more audacious than a championship contender betting their future on a player who's forgotten how to shoot a basketball? The Boston Celtics are about to embark on one of the most fascinating psychological experiments in recent NBA history, and it could either be the stroke of genius that completes their championship puzzle or the miscalculation that derails their entire season. Ben Simmons, the enigmatic former All-Star who spent the last few years becoming the poster child for wasted potential, is reportedly 1 week away from deciding his next destination, and Boston is rolling out the red carpet for basketball's most polarizing figure. Think about the sheer audacity of this situation. The Celtics, a franchise built on championship tradition and no-nonsense basketball philosophy, are seriously considering adding a player who's become synonymous with playoff disappearances and offensive limitations. This isn't just about adding depth, it's about whether Boston believes they can fix what multiple organizations have failed to repair. The timing couldn't be more perfect for this basketball rehabilitation project. With Jayson Tatum sidelined indefinitely due to an Achilles tear and 4 rotation players gone, the Celtics have created the exact scenario where Simmons could potentially rediscover his relevance. But the question remains, is Ben Simmons the answer to Boston's problems, or is he just another problem disguised as a solution? The perfect storm of opportunity and desperation. Let's examine why this potential marriage makes sense from both sides, because despite all the skepticism surrounding Simmons, there's genuine logic to this madness. The Celtics find themselves in an unexpected position, a championship-caliber roster with significant holes created by injuries and roster turnover. Tatum's Achilles injury has fundamentally altered Boston's offensive identity. They're no longer the team that can rely on elite scoring from their primary star, which means they need players who can create offense through other means. Enter Simmons, whose playmaking ability and defensive versatility could theoretically fill multiple gaps simultaneously. The departure of 4 rotation players has created playing time opportunities that simply didn't exist before. Simmons wouldn't be fighting for minutes on a deep roster, he'd be competing for a legitimate role on a team that needs his specific skill set. This isn't charity, it's necessity disguised as opportunity. For Simmons, the appeal is obvious. After years of being marginalized and criticized, he has a chance to contribute to a championship contender under a coach who's proven he can maximize player potential. Joe Mazzulla's system emphasizes ball movement, defensive intensity, and basketball IQ, all areas where Simmons has historically excelled. The rehabilitation project that could define both careers. What makes this situation so compelling is that it represents a rehabilitation project for both player and organization. Simmons needs to prove he can still contribute at the highest level, while the Celtics need to demonstrate they can adapt their system to maximize unconventional talent. Simmons' recent season with the Clippers provides both hope and concern. His regular season numbers, 5.0 points for 0.7 rebounds and 5.6 assists, might seem modest, but they came in a limited role on a team that wasn't designed to maximize his strengths. More importantly, he stayed healthy for 51 games, showing he can maintain availability when properly managed. However, his playoff performance tells a different story. Averaging just 0.8 points per game in 5 playoff appearances is the kind of production that gets players benched permanently. This isn't just about shooting struggles, it's about a complete disappearance when games matter most. The Celtics would be betting that their system and culture can address these issues. They've historically been successful at getting maximum effort from players who've struggled elsewhere, and their championship pedigree might provide the motivation Simmons needs to rediscover his elite form. The systemic fit and strategic considerations from a pure basketball perspective, Simmons could address several of Boston's current needs. His playmaking ability would help offset the creative burden typically carried by Tatum, while his defensive versatility would allow the Celtics to maintain their identity on that end of the floor. Simmons' ability to guard multiple positions would be particularly valuable for a team that's lost defensive depth. His size and athleticism would give Boston lineup flexibility they currently lack, allowing them to experiment with different defensive schemes and matchups. The offensive integration would be more challenging, but not impossible. The Celtics have proven they can succeed with non-traditional offensive players, and their system creates opportunities through movement and spacing rather than relying on individual shot creation. The key would be defining Simmons' role clearly and playing to his strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. He'd need to embrace a complementary role rather than trying to be the primary offensive initiator, which might actually suit his current skill set better than the star role he's struggled with elsewhere. The competition and alternative scenarios, Simmons' decision isn't just about basketball fit, it's about choosing between different types of opportunities. The Sacramento Kings offer a young, developing team where he could potentially rebuild his value. The New York Knicks provide a high-pressure environment with championship aspirations, but limited opportunity for significant role expansion. The Phoenix Suns present perhaps the most intriguing alternative. They reportedly have access to their mid-level exception after the Bradley Beal situation, which means they could offer Simmons more money than Boston's veteran minimum. They also have a championship-caliber roster with clear needs for playmaking and defensive versatility. However, Boston's unique combination of opportunity and organizational stability might be exactly what Simmons needs at this stage of his career. The Celtics have a proven track record of player development and a culture that demands excellence without creating the kind of toxic environment that can derail fragile confidence. The financial and roster implications, the financial aspect of this potential signing reveals both the opportunity and the risk involved. Boston can only offer the veteran minimum, which means Simmons would be taking a significant pay cut to join a championship contender. This suggests genuine motivation to rebuild his career rather than simply chasing the biggest contract. From Boston's perspective, the minimal financial commitment makes this a low-risk, high-reward proposition. If Simmons fails to contribute meaningfully, they can move on without significant salary cap implications. If he succeeds, they'll have acquired a former All-Star for a fraction of his previous value. The roster construction challenges are more complex. Boston currently has a full 15-man roster, but maintains flexibility to make adjustments before training camp. Adding Simmons would require corresponding moves, which could impact team chemistry and rotation balance. The psychological and cultural elements, perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this potential signing, is the psychological component. Simmons has spent years dealing with criticism, trade rumors, and questions about his commitment to improvement. Joining a championship contender would represent both validation and enormous pressure. Boston's culture of accountability and high expectations could either motivate Simmons to reach his potential or expose his limitations more clearly. The Celtics don't accept mediocrity, and their championship standards would leave no room for the kind of passive play that has defined Simmons' recent career. The leadership dynamic would also be crucial. Without Tatum's dominant presence, other players would need to step up as leaders, and Simmons could potentially find his voice in ways that weren't possible on his previous teams. The timeline and decision factors, with Simmons reportedly making his decision within the next week, the urgency factor adds another layer of complexity. This isn't a decision that can be made slowly or without commitment from both sides. The Celtics would need assurance that Simmons is genuinely motivated to contribute, while Simmons would need confidence that Boston can provide the environment he needs to succeed. The timing also coincides with other roster moves the Celtics are considering. Their exploration of trades involving Anthony Simons and Georges Niang suggests they're actively trying to optimize their roster construction, and Simmons' decision could impact those negotiations. The broader implications for NBA reclamation projects, this potential signing represents something larger than just one player joining one team. It's a test case for whether elite organizations can successfully rehabilitate players who've struggled elsewhere. The NBA has seen numerous examples of players rediscovering their form after changing environments, but few have involved such high-profile failures. If Simmons succeeds in Boston, it would validate the approach of taking calculated risks on talented players who've fallen out of favor. If he fails, it would reinforce the notion that some players simply can't overcome their limitations regardless of circumstance. The verdict on risk versus reward, the potential Ben Simmons signing represents everything that makes NBA roster construction fascinating. It's a perfect storm of talent, opportunity, desperation, and hope that could either create championship magic or spectacular failure. For Boston, it's a low-risk move with potentially transformative upside. For Simmons, it's a chance to resurrect his career and prove he can still contribute at the highest level. The convergence of these interests creates a situation where both sides have everything to gain and relatively little to lose. The next week will determine whether this basketball rehabilitation project becomes reality or remains an intriguing what-if scenario. Either way, it represents the kind of bold move that championship teams sometimes need to make to maintain their competitive edge. This potential Ben Simmons signing has me completely divided because I can see both the upside and the massive risk involved. What's your take? Do you think the Celtics can actually fix what's been broken for years, or are they just setting themselves up for disappointment? Is this the kind of calculated risk that championship teams need to take, or should they look for safer alternatives? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I'm genuinely curious whether you see this as genius or madness. And hit that like button if you're as fascinated by these NBA redemption stories as I am.